Hi, everybody. Welcome back to On the DL. I'd like to welcome our guest today, Kashif Khan from the DNA Company. Hi, Kashif. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm blown away. Even before I have had the opportunity to formally meet you this way, we have spoken on the phone, we have exchanged emails, but I have to tell our audience that I've been blown away by you and by your company. So, off the hop, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what your company is?
Sure. We run a functional genomics testing company. Sounds boring and dry, but it's really cool, and I'll tell you why. I am now 42 years old. When I was in my late 30s, I was pretty sick. Just like most entrepreneurs, you work yourself to death, and then one day you try and fix everything. And that's what I
Mhm.
did. And I had, you name it, migraines, eczema, psoriasis, and depression, digestive issues. Everything was broken. And so I tried to heal myself. It went from this doctor to this pill to MRI for this, and four or five different doctors telling me four or five different things. And that's when I took a step back and realized this doesn't add up. All that's the check mark for success is that things are kind of managed and not progressing versus answering the question, why did it happen the first? What did I do wrong? How did I get
Mhm.
here? I wasn't being told that. That's when I self-discovered that my genetics, there was literal pages missing. Literal genes that I just didn't have. And the things that I was being exposed to, I was never meant to be exposed to. And when I started working on the root cause, all these things went away. The symptoms started to go away, and then the pain went away, and then I no longer had conditions which I was labeled as having, and I'm now healthier than I've ever been in my life. And so I literally walked away, built the DNA company to make sure this gets in everybody's hands.
So, what does the DNA company do for people?
So through functional testing, we interpret better. So there's a lot of genetic testing out there. It's been around for a long time. The challenge has been that geneticists believe that genetics is only for genetic conditions, meaning you're born with a problem because a switch was turned on or off in your genes, and you now have this issue that you have to find a therapeutic for. You're not born with diabetes, cholesterol problems, breast cancer, infertility issues. These things happen later in life because
Mhm.
you've made choices that are misaligned to your genomic map. There's a something you're designed for. You may be designed to be a beautiful Ferrari, but take that Ferrari off-roading, it's going to fall apart,
Mm.
right? And but an SUV can handle that job, but try and race against a Ferrari doesn't work. So what is your human construction? What do you constitute it of? If you know that, then all of a sudden environment, nutrition, lifestyle, all the choices you have to make every day. What are the right choices for you? And you thrive versus ending up like me.
So, earlier on in the season on the DL, we had Monica Schneer,
Right.
supermodel, former supermodel, a beautiful human being, on the program, speaking about her journey, her health journey, and where she had hit her wall and was literally pounding her head against a wall because she couldn't get answers, she couldn't make changes, and she had gone to the DNA company, she had her genes tested, the results came back, and she started to make some significant changes to her diet, her lifestyle, her nutrition, and she saw changes almost
Mm-hmm.
immediately. She said within weeks she started to feel better, and that's why she was speaking out about it. So I thought, well, that's pretty that's pretty darn interesting. That's really interesting stuff. And I also feel too that the test, and I'm just throwing this out there, the test is not insanely expensive. Yes, it costs money. It's not thousands and thousands of dollars. It used to be
Oh
very,
yeah.
very expensive to do this. But this is like, I don't know, like for women, if they've ever bought a package, a package of facials or certain beauty products, it's the same price.
Right.
So I thought to myself, this is becoming more mainstream, or it can be more mainstream when it's just a few $100s. And I thought to myself, well, Dana, you have a lot of health stuff going on, just like every other woman in midlife. And wouldn't it be nice to know? And so here we are. You have the results of my test, which we're going to talk about out loud in the spirit of on the DL. Nothing is kept off the table. We talk about everything. I've talked a lot about myself. I've given a lot of myself on this podcast, but I have to say I've never done this.
Yeah,
So I'm a
inside
little
out.
afraid. I'm a little afraid. Before we do that, before we talk about my results, I want to speak about a couple quotes that you have said. I've done a lot of research before this podcast, and you said this, which I thought was incredible. You said a 40-year-old who looks and feels like they are 28 isn't because they have left things to chance. What does that mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Oh,
lost you for a second. I have no clue what
sorry,
happened there.
thought we froze there. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to take this again. I'm going to read a quote that you said. A 40-year-old who looks and feels like they are 28 isn't because they have left things to chance. Is that true?
Yeah, for sure. Meaning that there's some genetic lotteries that people win, right? But for the most part, it's because they made choices aligned to their DNA. And all we're saying is the pace at which you age is a choice. We're all going to age.
Mm.
But why do some age faster than others? It's because they did stuff that they were not designed to do. And you can actually slow or even reverse the aging process. I've done that in myself. I look not younger now than I did 6 or 7 years ago.
I know when you said you're 42, I mean, people are listening to this. Of course, you can watch us on YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff, but I urge people to to look you up because you look extremely young, and it's just like the color of your skin, the brightness in your eyes. You look very youthful. Not that everybody's running towards that look.
Right.
It for me, I mean, again, I'll say this out loud. I know how to look younger. I've got those tools, right? Like I've been in media for over 20 years. I know a lot of tricks. I know a lot of places I can go, all the little secrets to make myself look better. That's not a lie. But the
Yeah.
inside, I can't, there's only so much vitamin D I can take. There's so much sunscreen I can put on. There's only so much, I don't know, curcumin for my muscles. Like I'm just trying to explain, like just throwing things out there that I thought was helping me feel better, that I thought was perhaps maybe slowing things down, but they're not. And I have to
Yeah,
tell
for
you,
sure.
I'm freaked out. I'm
Yeah.
actually freaked out. I am missing genes. I'm not absorbing very important minerals and nutrients to help me in the aging process. And when we say aging, everybody, I don't mean like getting old. We mean like from decade to decade. Even 20-year-olds start to age, right? So we say aging, it doesn't mean that you're an old person. It's just a way of describing the way it's a process, right? So the other thing said too, what if you could change the day you die?
Yeah.
What does
I
that mean?
I sincerely believe, because I've been through it myself. So 90% of our healthcare budget, and that's the actual number, not just an exaggeration, is chronic disease, meaning things you're not born with, things that happen because you made the wrong choices, like cardiovascular diseases, certain cancers, etc. So if you can look into the future and see what's coming, and you knew exactly why it was coming, that why is the most critical piece that we don't ask, and then you can all of a sudden know what to do about it to prevent it. If you know why you age, if you know what happens at the cellular level and why cells degrade and degrade, and all over time your skin starts to sag and hair turns white because that's a direct reflection of what's going on with your cells, and you can turn the dials on that, you can choose to add 10, 15, maybe 20 healthy years to your life. And we're not just saying live longer, but live quality years. It's there was a study by Harvard
Wow.
that said that there was 5 habits that if people did, so the average American female, I think, lives to 78. And they
That's
said
it?
that if, yeah, that's it. And they
Mm.
said that if you do these 5 things, on average, women will live an extra 14 years.
Okay, let's
What
hear
are,
them.
what are the 5 things?
Mm-hmm.
Don't smoke,
Mm-hmm.
maximum 1 drink a day,
Mm-hmm.
maintain a healthy weight,
Mm-hmm.
uh, eat properly. And they didn't even say what that meant. And exercise 3 hours a week.
Okay, I'm
So,
good. I'm good. Tack on the 14 years.
yeah,
I'm good. I don't even have a drink a day.
yeah. But what this is telling us is
Yes.
that our habits and what we've become are so misaligned with what we're supposed to do
Yes.
that we're 14 years, we're not, it's not you're adding 14, you're removing 14 years from your life by just going and doing what without thinking. Right. So just simple tweaks will give you that. So now imagine if you went into your DNA and found out what you actually needed to do beyond not drinking more than one drink a day and not smoking, which any child knows, right? That's where you get into the 20, 30, 40 years of life extension. Why are people living to 120 and 130 today, which is actually happening? What did they do right? That's what we need to ask, which we're
Okay.
going to dig in with your DNA now.
Okay. So, I mean, I have like pages and pages of notes to talk about all of this, but these are just some of the things that when people get their genes tested, you're able to um, talk to them about their mental health, their
Mm-hmm.
heart health,
Mm-hmm.
risk of cancers, anti-aging, which we just talked about, menopause, perimenopause, sleep issues, immunity, a personalized diet to help
Right.
you look and feel better, and personalized fitness to help
Yeah.
you look and feel better. You talk about the idea of inflammation versus anti-inflammatory diets as
Mm-hmm.
well. Um, Monica, when she was here, Monica Schneier, talked about very openly that she was exercising and eating completely wrong for her genes.
Right.
And once she made the little bit of tweaks, she saw a huge difference. Now, we could start and plow away right into my diet and nutrition profile if you'd like. We can start there
Sure.
because that was the first section or system that came up on my report. I
Yeah.
will tell you it was quite aligned with how I live, which
Okay.
is wonderful. Um, Except there are a couple things that I probably do wrong with my diet. But in terms of fitness, I'm all about heavy weightlifting and like heavy for my size. And I'm not a cardio girl. The only cardio I get or do is walking. I gave up that
Right.
hardcore cardio years ago and I felt so much better once I did.
Right. Yeah. There's certain
Yeah.
people for whom cardiovascular exercise, and this sounds counterintuitive, will be the source of their cardiovascular disease. And we'll get into why that
Wow.
is. So when I look
Okay.
at your diet profile, and I'm just looking at raw data on another screen here, kind of as we're
Yeah,
talking.
of course. Yes, of course. Yeah.
And the one interesting thing is the way we think about diet nutrition, we apply what we call behavioral genomics. How do you even perceive? Because if I tell you something, you're not receiving the same thing that somebody else is receiving because you're interpreting what I'm saying.
Right.
And then your habits are
Exactly.
based, yeah, and your habits are now based on the way you think. So if I start with that, I actually look at your neurochemicals, and one big red flag that stands out is your adrenaline or your noradrenaline response. So what does that mean? There's a gene that determines how well you deal with negative stimuli in terms of its permanent impact, imprint, PTSD, trauma, and you don't
Hmm.
do well there at all.
I
Which
don't.
means no, which means that um, what you do well is that you're not in the moment for that long. There's an enzyme called COMT, which is produced by the COMT gene, and you have a sort of medium fast version of it. So what does this look like? This looks like when there is an occasion of trauma, pain, negative stimuli, you are much more likely to imprint it and remember it, which means that the next time you're talking to that person or in that scenario, you're kind of holding the grudge.
Oh
And you're
my
starting
God.
off, yeah, and you're starting off where you left off last time, right? And it's kind of like, not this again. And they're saying, what are you talking about? This has nothing to do with last time. You're like, it's the exact same thing over again, right? Car accident, God forbid, you may not want to go down that street for the next few months. You may not even want to look at a car for a couple of days, right? Whereas somebody else just jumps in an Uber and goes home. So what this, and why do I bring this up when we talk about diet nutrition? Because it impacts over time how you actually deal with your meal planning, how you actually think about food, right? Now I'm going
Hmm.
to add a couple more neurochemicals because it paints the story a little further. Um, your not only do you feel the trauma and imprint it and remember, so it leads to this kind of emotional intelligence. You have this emotional filter about things. You also have a somewhat dysregulated brain-derived neurotropic factor, and what its primary purpose is to protect you from concussion, but it also is implicit in mood. How? It gives things more meaning. So you're remembering the pain, but you're also giving it a lot of meaning. So
Hmm.
that traumatic event may be kind of, call it, crippling or a weight on your shoulders,
Hmm.
right? That thing that somebody did to you or said to you or took away from you, you remember it and it means a lot.
Hmm.
So this is where
Makes
people tend,
sense.
yeah. So it might sound familiar, and I'm sure some things come to mind.
Oh yeah.
Whereas some people, yeah, I feel it, but I don't care. Like, give me the lawyer's letter. It hurts, but I'm just gonna I deal with it, right? For you, it means a lot. So, slamming the door, walking out of the room, I can't handle this right now. That's a potential answer to something. Whereas for some people, that's not possible, right? So why is this important? Because coping mechanisms, there may be days where you're eating which you don't even realize these extra calories. And if you don't first understand your neural pathways and how you think, you can't uh, execute the plan properly. Because part of the plan is when we say eat 3 times a day and you're actually eating 4, but you don't actually count the fourth meal because the fourth is an emotional meal, right? You don't even think of it as food. Literally, because your body
You're
doesn't work.
killing me. You're
Yeah.
killing me because I have been doing that lately so much. I'm like, that's not a meal. That's a mini snack.
Yeah.
And my kids will say, "What? Why are you eating again?" I went, "I'm not. It's just a snack." Like, no, mom, that's a meal. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a meal.
It is. So you'll never count those. Like, it's not part of your planning. It's not part of your thinking. But you need it emotionally, not
Yes.
not for nutrition, right?
Right.
And there's other ways to do that. So now that you know that, so just that one tweak. Imagine somebody that's stuck. I just can't get rid of these last 10 pounds. I don't know what's
Mm.
going on, and they're stuck, and they don't even know they're doing it. And it sounds to the people that don't do this, how could you not know? Well, you don't think like Dana thinks, right? You don't have the same neurochemical pathway. So you don't perceive the world the way Dana perceives the world. The way she perceives the world is this is not food. This is a coping mechanism. This is me satisfying my soul, not my stomach, right?
But the good news is that I feed on really good food.
Yeah. And that's
That's
the
the good
good,
news.
that is the
Yeah.
good news because typically that doesn't lead to, that actually might fuel things because there's so much that's so nutrient rich that you're just empowering yourself, right?
Thank God.
So now layering more thoughts on that, your dopamine response, which is your pleasure or reward seeking response. So pleasure is like eating something tasty, reward is achieving at work, is right in the middle.
Mm.
So you're not an addict. You're not kind of low dopamine where you kind of don't get a hit and you constantly need. And you're also not a binger where your dopamine experience is so high that everything gives you pleasure. It's so easy for you to experience pleasure that you're almost flaky because you don't really care because everything's good. But the thing that you find that is elevated, you get lost in it, just completely
Mm.
lost. So typically people are on one end or the other. We don't see many people in the middle, which you are, which
Oh,
speaks to, yeah, and which speaks to this sort of, if you think about the work you've done and sort of media work, it speaks to that sort of dependable, reliable, has to be sort of in game mode, ready to go at any moment,
that's
right?
me.
You're
Hmm.
not phased by reward, you're not phased by pleasure. You experience the world as per what it is, and you're in game time all the time. So
Hmm.
it's not, imagine being reward seeking and trying to work in media where you're only going to work on what excites you. You're only going to work or you're going to jump around from this story to that, so you're not going to get it done, right? Or the opposite where you're high dopamine where you're not interested, so you're not going to do the story that you don't like to do. Game time is, it doesn't matter what the story, why it's happening, who I'm talking to, I am in the zone and I get it done,
Mm. That sounds
right?
like
That's it.
me.
Yeah, and that's
Hmm.
a unique skill that most people
Hmm.
don't have. Your clearance of these chemicals is also right down the middle. So it happens for the appropriate amount of time to be sort of dependable, reliable. It's not like it happens too short. So I'm kind of ADHD. That
Right.
COMT enzyme clears for some people, the chemicals too fast. So they jump from thing to thing to thing to thing. And then they
Hmm.
get diagnosed with ADHD when in fact they don't have a condition. They just have a fast enzyme. Or the person who
Really.
has a really slow enzyme where they kind of get lost in the moment and it lasts a long time so they don't move on to the other things, they get stuck,
Can
right?
I
You're
interrupt you for 1 sec? Because
sure,
when you said
sure.
ADHD, that makes me think of all the misdiagnosed children and teens and even adults.
Yep.
Um, and I wonder if a test like this could help with a misdiagnosis. So if someone's been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD and they've been living with this their whole life and they've been taking lots of medication or different
Yep.
medications to try to live with this condition,
Yep.
and when in fact it's you're lacking a certain enzyme and that could actually fix
Yep.
whatever it is with focus or attention.
I can't tell you how many kids we've taken from this was their crutch to this is actually their superpower. Yeah.
Wow.
Why? Because when you're clinically representing, like, why, what are you doing? I can't handle this. You're not doing your homework. You're not this typical struggles at home.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go to the doctor. I think my kid has a attention problem because that's what we've heard. That's what we've learned. And so you lean to what you know. And then the doctor says, yes, well, everything you're describing, I can't, there's nothing I can plug into to test for. There's no blood test for ADHD,
Mm-hmm.
right? There is a genetic test for the biochemistry that points to that type of behavior, but we don't believe that there's a condition. What we believe is that you either seek reward so much because your dopamine levels are low, that you seem to be more reward seeking, and so it's hard for you to focus on one thing, or you seek reward so little that you're kind of flaky and not interested, so you seem to be attention deficit, or your neurochemicals clear so fast that you can't focus for long enough, or your serotonin is so dysregulated, which we didn't talk about yet, that you're very highly prone to being so reacting to stimulus, and every little, whether positive or negative thing, gets your attention. So all of these things, if they're misunderstood, become crutches, become diagnosable, labelable conditions, when in fact it can also drive what I have as entrepreneurial spirit. I
Yes.
don't experience dopamine very well, so I'm seeking the next hit and taking risk and building things. For someone that is serotonin in a deficit that seems to be irritable and bothered by everything, it could be that, oh, you have a mood disorder, or it could be that you just are hypersensitive to stimuli. So you see details that nobody sees. So you should be the analyst. You should be the
That's,
person that's diving deep and coming back with the details that the rest of the team can't catch.
do I have a
So
serotonin deficit?
no, you're optimal there. So that means that you're actually less likely to catch the details, right? You think more macro. You think
Mm.
more like in the
What's
moment.
next?
Sorry?
Do I think about what's next? Am I preparing? Is that what that means or no?
Yeah, I would. That's the combination of your sort of reward seeking path, which means you're sort of dependable, reliable, in the middle, get it done as it should be, plus your serotonin path, which is I think about the macro and I can focus on the task at hand because other things don't irritate me or bother me. There's a person that that clock is ticking, I can't function, or
Mm,
there's an email that comes in, so I can't focus on what I was doing. I now have to do this. No, you get it
mm,
done. You're in the zone all the time,
mm.
right?
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, which
that
is
sounds like me.
yeah, which is important for your role.
Hmm.
So now imagine turn the dial this way or that way on any one of these chemicals of the brain, and the behavior completely changes. And what
Yeah.
looks like a condition is only misalignment to context. The thing that you're wired to do. Why are you designed like this? Because this is what your ancestors needed as a tool, right? Why do some people have very little dopamine expression, very fast clearance, where they jump and jump and jump? Because their ancestors maybe were warriors that had to fight and be constantly aware and constantly moving around, and that's what you inherited. All
Hmm.
that's happening is now is everyone is in the exact same context. Wake up, go to school, do your thing, and it has to be done as per the way everybody does everything, and that
You
works
know,
for yeah.
what I mean, I read through the report. It took me hours to go through because it was very intensive, which is incredible to give that kind of information to people.
Yeah.
Um, but what hit me really, there was several things that hit me that I went, whoa, um, that I'm missing some genes in
Yeah.
terms of my inflammation and being able to deal with toxins. That kind of freaked me out. And the idea also, if you're getting back to diet and nutrition, because you said that it really does start there with a lot of people,
Yes.
particularly athletes and executives, entrepreneurs who want to achieve more and they want to start at that sort of ground level, was that for me to have optimum health is that 20% of my diet should be fat. The rest of it, like 65%, should be lean meats
Right.
or lean protein, which would exclude red meat and processed meats and all that kind of stuff. And only 20% of my diet should be fats.
Right. And I'll tell you why.
And that kind of freaked me out because I am the olive oil, avocado, coconut oil girl. Like I
Yeah.
love my fats, and
Yeah.
maybe it's just too much.
It is. So the unique thing about fats, See, there's some conditions which are sensorial. You feel it. Lactose intolerance, run to the
Oh
washroom.
yeah.
I know I got a problem, right?
Yeah.
So things like fat, the problem that you face, there's no feeling. You don't know what's happening until it's too late, right? And then
Mm.
you have a cholesterol issue or a blockage
Right.
somewhere, right?
Right. That's what I'm
What's
concerned about.
Yeah,
Yes.
so what's
Yeah.
going on there is the gene that metabolizes saturated fats into fuel, you have a somewhat not so good version of it, which means
Mm.
that conversion is difficult for your body, which means as you eat it, more likely to store it, especially if it's combined with starches. So your starch metabolization is also not so good. So the body will always lean on starch first as a fuel. It's the easiest thing to burn, sugar. So
Of course.
bread, rice, pasta, sugar. Then it will go to proteins. Then it will go to fats. And there's a
Mm.
reason for all this. First of all, starch is quick and easy. So we need that ability to get a hit. Second, eliminating frayed amino acids and proteins, which is the reason why we fast, prevents things like Alzheimer's and dementia and a lot of other diseases, because these are the things that can cross the blood-brain barrier and cause damage. Then your body will go to fat, right? So if you already are not you already don't have a good relationship with fat and you also don't have a good relationship with carbs and starches, you're gonna, if you have your typical Canadian recommended meal with the 4 food groups, you're gonna struggle day after day after day after day because you're struggling to get through the carbs. You're never going to get to the fats because you're then going to move on to the proteins, right? So why do we suggest what we suggest is the less starches you have, the quicker you get through that process, the less fats you have, the quicker you get through struggling with that. And all of a sudden you can metabolize properly, draw the nutrients you need to, and eat enough. One of the
Mm.
challenges we find with people is they actually don't eat enough because they're eating the wrong thing. So they're
Yeah.
always bloated and feel gross and they're not hungry enough for the next meal. So they're not getting, if you remove all the garbage and trying to eat clean like you do, the clean food, the nutrient dense food, they're not getting enough,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
So if you eat as per what your genes require, all of a sudden you're metabolizing very quickly. You're not bloated. Everything feels light. You have energy levels that are never felt before, and you're ready for the next meal in a few hours, right? As opposed to like 6 or 7 hours.
So the reason why I'm really focused on diet and nutrition for people to listen to is because it is the base for
Yeah,
many people, right? You
yeah,
fix that or you start tackling those issues, then everything starts to fall into place. I
yeah,
believe that's the easiest thing that you can do as a lay person, right? The
yeah,
idea of fixing diet and nutrition, your sleep habits,
yeah,
and then from there you can talk about hormones and inflammation and cardiovascular health, but those are the things sort of at the ground level that people can really change, really make a change, like Monica did, like I'm starting to implement now. I'm actually really starting to think about the fats that I'm eating. Even though they're good fats, it might just be too much. I might
yeah,
just be eating far too much. Even though they're clean and it's quote good for you, it just might, for my body, I have to be way more mindful of how much I'm putting in as each year passes, right?
yeah.
Because it's going to affect my
It
cardiovascular
compounds.
health.
Yeah, compounds.
Yes.
And there's some people for whom we tell them they need to get on a keto diet. They need to eat fat, and their
Yes.
primary nutrient that they eat is fat. There's some people that we tell them that, and then they
Not
all of a sudden
me.
they thrive. Yeah,
Not me.
there's some
No.
people for whom we tell them that the vegan diet is the wrong choice for them. I just had this conversation with my cousin, by the way, that that was the source of his health problems because he does
Really?
not produce the enzymes to break down beans, lentils, legume, chickpeas, all the primary protein sources for a vegan. Some people thrive, some people do well, but for him it was a problem.
So you also mentioned, you just said something about fasting, and I ask every single guest who comes on the DL to talk about this because I have always found it fascinating. People who
Yeah.
fast, people who intermittent fast, the health benefits, the health risks. So in my profile, am I somebody who should be intermittent fasting, or I shouldn't be intermittent fasting, given
Uh,
everything you know about my hormones, my inflammation, my diet, everything?
yeah. So I'm taking a peek at your hormones. And first of all, everybody should be intermittent fasting. Everybody. The question
Everybody.
is everybody. The question is how much. In as a general rule of thumb, men have no problem. They can do it every day. Women is where there's some complexity. And to be safe,
Right.
2 days a week. Any
Two?
woman can fast 2 days a week. Yeah, like a Tuesday, Thursday type thing. Any woman can intermittent fast twice a week, derive the benefit, and not have any of the risks.
And let me
What are
just
the
let's just
potential
be
risks?
clear too. Let's also just be clear that people, if they're thinking of doing that, they should talk to their healthcare provider, because a
For
lot of
sure.
people they do it wrong, right? They don't do it
Yeah.
properly, or they'll eat until midnight because they think that they're
Yeah.
supposed to only eat at night and then not eat all day, and that's
Yeah.
just not intermittent fasting. So I just wanted to put that out
For
there, because
sure.
I know a lot of people have done it wrong, and they have gotten quite sick and have gained a ton of weight because of it, which is bananas, because that's
Yeah.
not the point of it.
If you do it wrong,
Um,
it causes problems. So find, I
mhm.
would say, like a functional medicine health coach, or Dave Asprey has a great book called Fast This Way, which just came
He
out.
was on. He was
It
on
was
the
a,
DL, and
yeah,
I know he endorses your company. He believes in what you do. We're all kind of like this small community, right? We're
yeah,
all kind of we're talking and picking from each other, because we're all in the same we all on the same mindset. All of us are
yeah,
thinking alike,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's wonderful, because I think of myself as just more of that sort of channel for people to get the information. I'm no
for
expert.
sure.
I just want the experts on so people can hear it, absorb it, and make changes that will make them feel better.
Yeah, it's amazing that people have access. And you know, what I was saying is, the on the hormone side for women,
Yes. Yeah.
the challenge is that when a man fasts, what are you telling your body? You're telling your body that there's a struggle. So men actually develop growth hormones and get into autophagy and clear their
Mm-hmm.
systems and get stronger. For women, it's, oh, if I'm ever going to have a child again and I'm in this kind of condition, I need to now start storing fat and I need to deal with this lack of nutrition. It's the exact opposite response for some women. On your side, it's not as big of a concern. When I look at your hormones, so progesterone converts to testosterone, converts to estrogen, and you have a monthly cycle. Men, by the way, do this every day. Women do it once a month, but the cycle takes a month, right? So your progesterone conversion into testosterone is pretty good. So your initial pool of hormones is healthy and clean, but your conversion to estrogen is somewhat slow.
Mm.
So it sits there as a testosterone, and it does bleed into estrogen, but slower than a typical woman. So what does that speak to? Body type. If you look at you, more petite frame, right? Jawline is a little more pronounced. You know, it speaks to, call it, more of a runner sprinter type body type versus, call it, the extreme would be like a Kim Kardashian, even though most of that's fake, but the outcome, which is this
The
voluptuous, curvy,
hourglass. Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's estrogen. The estrogen
Really?
dominance of, yeah. That's estrogen dominance in both men and women leads to that sort of, the
Curve.
thicker frame, curves,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful hair, beautiful glowing skin, no acne, right? That type of stuff. But there's a whole slew of health concerns, especially if there's estrogen toxicity, which a lot of women have that they don't realize, because before you clear that estrogen into the menstrual cycle, you first convert it into a metabolite, either 2, 4, or 16 hydroxy estrogen is what they're called. 2 is the good, clean stuff that you want. 4 and 16 are toxic. You produce the toxic stuff. So, why is this important? Because, as you said, you're missing some key detox genes, which we're going to bring back to your diet as well. So, you also don't clear it so well. So, now some
Uh
women,
oh.
yeah,
Uh oh. That's
some
not
women,
good.
it's not good if you do the wrong thing. If you do the right thing, you can manage it. So, some women, as they age, uh, here's another one problem: 85% of North American women will be on a birth control pill for some elongated period of time. For
Mm-hmm.
you, that means more estrogen fueling that estrogen toxicity fire, right?
Yeah. I'm not on the birth control pill. I'm good. I'm
Yeah,
done with my baby. Yeah. No.
yeah. Some
Past
women,
that.
yeah, and then some women will go on like a hormone therapy as they age,
Yeah.
right? As they get into menopause, more estrogen fueling that fire. Some women don't understand the estrogen mimics or hormone mimics that are around in everything they do. Something as simple as a Teflon coated frying pan, if you use it daily, mimics hormones as it enters your body. It's toxic. The pesticides in your lawn that make it look so beautiful, as they enter your body can sometimes, depending which chemical, mimic hormones, the cleaning chemicals you use. There's so many things in and around what we do every day that we are not genetically designed to process, that our body confuses as hormones when they enter your system. Something as simple as a grocery receipt, like the type that has the laser printing on it, or it's imprinted on it, mimics estrogen when it enters your body, the chemicals from there, right? So now,
What?
yeah, so now all of this stuff that you're exposing yourself to every day can take you from, yeah, I have estrogen toxicity, but I'm healthy, to now I've added 10, 12 other inputs of estrogen, bringing that toxicity to a level where breast cancer could be a possibility, ovarian cancer, a crazy menopause, up and down, mood disorders, all the stuff that this toxic metabolite and the inflammatory load that it creates could lead to. Right.
So
So
you're saying that I have a normal level of estrogen, or you're saying that my level is converted into toxicity? I
yeah,
didn't
your
understand that
hormone
part.
levels to begin with are low. So your estrogen level is low for a typical woman. And we don't need to sort of blood test you to know that. We already know that the way you metabolize hormones, it's not the best, right?
Great,
What you're
great,
doing well, yeah. Where
great.
you're doing well is in testosterone, which is great for living to 90 plus and having
Oh,
vitality and energy and strength, right?
woohoo!
Yeah, testosterone is one of the single markers, best markers for longevity. Uh, but the sort of feminine traits and mass, like suppose you would not be a good candidate to do heavy deadlifting and bench pressing, for
Why
example.
I do that?
Yeah, you can do it, but you're not going to get big, right? You're not going to get like a sort of a bodybuilder. You're not designed to be a
Oh,
bodybuilder. You're designed to
no.
be more like a, call it like Wonder Woman, like, tight defined muscle that's easy to see, but you're not huge.
I'm gonna go with the Wonder Woman. That makes me feel so much better right now. That's great. I'm going with Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll
that
get you
that's
the
my
gold.
takeaway.
Yeah, you need the
Yeah.
gold bangle too.
Oh, I have one.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna start wearing my gold bangle again. I'm gonna wear it, and now I'm gonna call myself Wonder Woman and show off my muscles,
Yeah, no kidding.
because But yeah, that's great. So I feel a little bit better now that I'm Wonder Woman-ish. But I'm worried about the idea of, HRT, like the add back.
Yep. So
That's
now
bad for me.
you have to be very careful with what specifically are you taking. Remember the hormones that you take in this cascade, clinicians assume that if I'm giving you testosterone, I've given you testosterone. If I've given you progesterone, I've given you progesterone. No, there's genetic instructions in your body that whatever testosterone you have converts it into estrogen or converts it into DHT or gets rid of it.
Mm.
Right. And this is where what I give you, I can't, we have, Toronto is the home of hockey training. And so we work with a lot of NHL players. And how many times have we had NHL players come to us saying that I don't know what's happening, but my libido is down and I'm growing man boobs, gynomastia, and I train. I don't know what's happening. Why? Because their coach tests their testosterone levels and says your levels are low. You should take some testosterone. But if they're estrogen dominant, they just convert it all to estrogen. So the more testosterone you give them, the more they just keep converting it all into estrogen because that's the cascade, the next step in the hormone cascade. And so all of a sudden, what the intention was, let's get the testosterone levels up, is just I gave you something that converts into estrogen, which what they should have done is block the conversion of testosterone into estrogen, the personalized insight. This is what you need versus what everybody needs. That's
Right.
what DNA can give you. What do I actually need? Right.
That's
And so we do
genomics.
that and you flip a couple switches and focus on the right problem, and all of a sudden they're thriving. Right. And the answer would have been give him more, give him more, give him more. And he would have, who knows what would happen. Right.
Right. It had big
So
boobs.
yeah.
Big
So
boobs.
okay, so on your hormones, that's what we see. Now bringing it back to the thing that you brought up that we missed was, again, in diet nutrition, you are missing some key detox genes. So the glutathione pathway is where you rely on this system to clear toxins from your body. So we all know that if you drink alcohol, your liver gets rid of it for you, and you're supposed to get rid of these toxins that were never meant to be in your body to begin with. So because most of us come from ancestry that didn't have the level of toxicity we now have, our detox systems aren't that good.
Mm.
And for you, this is one of the areas where you can uniquely actually be missing genes. So we hear about mutations, variations, which is what most of these testing companies look for. There's also something that we uniquely look for called a copy number variation. If your DNA is your human instruction manual, here's this book that's in every one of your cells telling your cells what to do. A copy number variation means somebody tore an entire page out. So now you're skipping, or maybe even a chapter, and you don't know what the instruction is. It's not there.
Oh,
So for
great.
you, what's the
This is
risk? The
great.
risk is bringing, again, this back to diet nutrition. The key detox genes that are the first line of defense at the gut. So where do things enter your body? You breathe things and you eat them, or sometimes through the skin. So when you eat things, you're supposed to have this first line of defense that gets rid of the stuff that should not get into the bloodstream. Before it gets there, let's grab it, take it, send it to the liver, get rid of it. You don't do that. You literally don't even have the genes. Forget about what version or what variation. You don't have the genes. You're missing them. So
Great.
now, yeah. So you're much more likely to get bloated, have digestive issues, have challenges where, yeah,
That's
well, I ate
me.
this. Sorry,
That's me my whole
that's you.
life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, I ate this last week and it was fine, but now I can't eat it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And why is it? It's not the food, it's the chemicals that they're laced with. Right. So, as a simple example, hey, I went to the shawarma place and it was great. Then I went to this another shawarma place and I felt horrible. Why?
Mm.
Well, in order to transport, chickpeas, which is what the hummus is made out of, they need to dry them to move them. So imagine harvesting chickpeas and then waiting for them to dry to ship versus using a chemical to expedite that drying so you can ship them faster and make more money, which is what happens. That chemical is a potent toxin. And when you're going to some places that bought it from some supplier that don't use that toxin, you feel okay. Then you go to some place that uses a different supplier that ships the chickpeas faster because they dried it and you felt horrible and you can't understand why. It's not the food, it's the chemicals that they're laced with, that drying agent that was used to dry the chickpeas that you're now eating that you don't have the genetic ability to clear, where your gut now struggles to cause this inflammatory reaction and some of it even gets into your blood.
So what would you tell someone to take or to do if they're missing that gene to try to clear out the toxins so they feel okay?
So this is the answer to everything. And this is the beauty about understanding your DNA. It's your genes are instructions. So you're supposed to tell your cells to do stuff. You either tell your cells really well, somewhat okay, like we talked about your brain chemicals, or poorly. And there's some genes where you don't even have the instruction, right?
Great.
So now if we know where the red flags are, and this was the whole point of genetics, it's not to where I think genetics got things wrong is trying to diagnose stuff, right? Let's move away from conditions and say, what are your genetic red flags? What process do you not do well? And we now know what 10 or 15 conditions that may lead to, but let's look at the process. You don't do this thing well, filtering at the gut. So there's two answers to that. If you don't do something well, you either need to do it better or reduce the load of doing it, which
Okay.
means twofold. I don't do this well, so I need to be very careful and informed about what's going into my gut. That's one, reduce the load. Second is I need to supplement and increase my
Mm.
capacity for this thing that I don't do. So the very specific processes that you don't do well, metabolizing fats, et cetera, et cetera. So burning it, converting starches into fuel, which may lead to diabetes if you don't do it well. So then take the right supplements that then do it for you because your body doesn't do it.
Okay, that makes
Right?
sense. That's an answer. That's a very good, that makes, I mean, it is twofold. You always have to be mindful of what you're putting in. But for me, I have to be extra mindful about certain toxins and things
Yeah.
that could lead to toxicity in my body because I don't have the gene that's going to be able to clear it out,
Yep.
which is very disconcerting because I worry about heart health. I worry about cancers because all of us have stuff like that in our family, right? In our family history. We all worry about all of that. And so that is a big concern for me. I'm
Yeah,
worried
it's
about
huge.
that. I'm
And
very
now
worried about it.
and now if we look at heart health as an example, the way we look at heart health isn't, again, disease centric. We understand why does it happen to begin with. What's going on is usually inflammation in the endothelial, so the inner lining of the arteries. So most heart
Mhm.
disease doesn't actually happen in the heart; it usually happens in the arteries, and then
Yeah.
eventually blood stops flowing and the heart has a problem. So we can determine genetically, and we've done this with you, what quality of hardware do you have? That inner lining of that blood vessel. Yours is not so good. It's not the worst, but it's not resilient, which means now you look at the combination. I don't prevent toxins from entering my bloodstream when I eat the wrong foods. Now I know that these toxins are in my blood. Now I know that these toxins are going to eventually make contact with this endothelial that was never designed to deal with toxins anyway. It's not the gut
Mm-hmm.
or the lungs, which are filters, right? And it's going to cause inflammation. It's going to cause damage, abrasions, right? Because this material that was not designed for this function. And on top of that, you have the not so good quality version of it, right?
Great.
So your hardware isn't the best. So now, if you are not careful and mindful of what you're eating and the toxins are getting in and they're in your blood, they're going to cause inflammation here. Well, the body's response to that is actually to use cholesterol as a hormone to repair and reduce the inflammation, which is where medically, again, we react to things we can measure in the blood, which is, hey, your cholesterol numbers are going up. Looks like the beginnings of heart disease. Yes, cholesterol numbers are tied to heart disease, but not because they cause the disease, because they're trying to repair the inflammation and damage being caused by the
Wow.
toxins, right?
Wow.
That's what's actually happening. And the challenge is when cholesterol meets the toxicity, which it was never designed to meet, it actually hardens and gets deposited.
Right.
It was never
Sounds very
that.
familiar.
Yeah. Yeah.
My father was very sick with that at the end of his life. So I'm thinking, sounds like it's something in our family.
Yeah. So what's in your
Mm.
family isn't what we believe. Heart disease is in my family. Cholesterol
Mm.
problems are in my family. What's in your family is bad hardware.
Mm.
So if I take your profile and put it on a beach in the Caribbean with perfect food, no chemicals, nice sleep, everything is perfect, you're not getting sick. You weren't born sick. Why does heart disease typically happen in the 50s and 60s? Because it takes that many years of doing the wrong thing to leading to the inflammatory level where the cholesterol is now overboard and you need to start taking a pill.
I would love to move to the Caribbean and eat clean food for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, I don't absorb vitamin D. So what does it matter?
Yeah. So
I
that
don't
now
absorb
the
it.
so
That's
that so now
terrible.
that's exactly it. So the challenge to that is there's three steps to vitamin D. It's the most complex micronutrient that we absorb. Why? Because it's the only one that if you have too much, it's actually toxic.
Right.
It's also the most important. So of the 22,000 genes you have in your genetic code, 2,000 are dependent on vitamin D. 10% of your human biochemistry is dependent on this one micronutrient. So this is why if you don't have enough, mood and behavior, bone issues, immunity goes down, everything gets screwed up. Even your hormone levels get screwed up, and the outcome of your bad hormone levels gets elevated, right? So this is probably the most important micronutrient you can deal with. And the challenge for you is that when you're out in the sun, you don't absorb it, you don't metabolize it. There's also a second step of taking it from the blood and then transporting it to the cell. That's a second gene, a separate
Mm-hmm.
process. There's also the step of binding it at the cell, which is a third gene and a third process. It's not just the doctor measured my blood and saw this much vitamin D, I'm okay. No, we need to know how much you transport and how much you
Mm-hmm.
bind, because that's where the
Right.
reaction actually happens. And if you don't do that well, it doesn't matter how much is in your blood. So
Right.
for you, what we recommend is multiple doses, right?
Right. I
Because
was
if we
reading
give
that.
it to you, you can't use it fast enough. Your vitamin
So in the
D,
morning and at night, even in the middle of the day, if I
not
think of
not in
it.
the night, just because it could keep you
Oh,
awake. I would
oh,
say,
really?
yeah, morning, lunch, and late afternoon at the latest.
Vitamin D can keep you awake?
Yeah, because keep in mind, vitamin D is
I didn't know that.
the traditional way that we received it was from the sun.
Mm,
So for your circadian rhythm, your internal
right.
clock, it triggers sun, daytime.
Ah,
So all the
okay.
daytime functions keep ticking,
Okay.
right? Your body
Okay.
gets confused and thinks there's a lot of vitamin D, there must be a lot of sun. It's still daytime, and the circadian rhythm and that clock gets screwed up.
So speaking of circadian rhythm, my sleep, pretty bad, huh?
Yeah. So so
I'm pretty
why?
messed up there too.
Yeah. So we look at sleep in three different ways. One is I can't fall asleep. One is I can't stay asleep. One is I sleep through the night, but I wake up not so rested. So for
That's it.
you, it's more
Mm,
about I can't fall asleep and I
mm,
wake up feeling groggy. I don't think you have the challenge of waking up in the middle of the night and then not getting back to sleep. I don't know. You can tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean, there's been periods of my life, but that's usually highly stressful situations
Yeah.
where I'm like anxious and I can't fall back to sleep because I'm just overthinking stuff. But because I hold on to things,
Yes.
as you said.
Yeah.
But generally, like most mothers, particularly coming at the end of a pandemic, out like a light, I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. But I do wake up groggy. I
Yeah.
do.
So
Mm,
there's a couple things going on there. Your circadian rhythm is off. So your
mm,
BDNF gene, the same gene that we talked about that develops neural pathways, is off. And so your body has a challenge with knowing what time it is. And the other challenge is we have all these extra stimulus of Netflix till I go to sleep, checking my email on my phone, beautiful pot lights that make my house so pretty. All of these things are counterproductive to melatonin production.
mm.
For melatonin, what did our ancestors used to do? It's dark and there was a fire, right? There was no light. It was cold at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was no noise, there was no smell. So all of those sensorial triggers that our bodies respond to, we're not getting. Now, for
Makes
some
total
people,
sense.
yeah, and for some people, it's okay because they have a really good clock that it doesn't matter. Their clock just knows what time it is. Your clock isn't the best. So any stimuli that further exaggerates, you know, signaling to your body that it's still daytime is going to cause an even bigger problem. So your body struggles with, is it sleep time or is it just nap time?
Interesting. I see.
Right?
I swear to you, I want to kill my husband that he has his computer on, that he's watching Netflix, and I have an eye patch on. I've got earplugs in. I sometimes put a pillow over my head. I'm like, turn your computer off. We fight about this all the time. He goes, I've dimmed it. It's okay. You go back to sleep. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to kill. And now I have proof. Now I have
Yeah,
medical
I
proof.
approve. So
Now I
that,
have proof.
yeah, that blue light is
Yes.
signaling a spectrum that tells your brain it is daytime, and it's not going to
Great.
produce a melatonin. It's not going to, get the hormone production going. What happens in your sleep? Hormone production, recovery, detox,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
repairing muscle tissue. Everything that you did during the day gets fixed in your sleep.
Everything that I need. It sounds like everything I need
Yeah.
anyway. I'm working that much harder. And I
Yeah.
also want to tell people listening to this, because I think it's really important, that when you have your DNA tested, um, with your company specifically, because I can't speak to other companies, I haven't interviewed anybody from another genomics firm or company, but you guys do offer incredible follow-up, that there's a
Mhm.
team of healthcare professionals ranging from doctors to naturopaths to registered dietitians to help people get on the right track, so that you're not just being, you're not just given a report like that's very long and detailed, which is fantastic, and saying, okay, go on your merry way and enjoy. I hope you're okay now. Take your vitamin D, and you're lacking this or lacking that, and we wish you all the best. It's not like
Right.
that. It's that there is incredible follow-up, because I did a lot of research before our interview to find out what is available for people, because I know people are going to reach out to me. They're going to say, okay, so now what's the next step after you have it, after you
Yeah.
have the test? What do you do? Which I
Yeah.
think
And
is really important.
we've thought about it both ways. We thought about it where you shouldn't need our help to understand your results. So
No,
we built
it's
the
a very thorough.
reports. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we built the reports in a way, and this is unique. Genetic testing, you usually can't get the most out of it unless there's some kind of consult or coach telling you what to do. So
Mm-hmm.
we built the reports in a way where we speak to the conditions like anxiety. I just want to look it up and figure it out. I don't want to have to
Mm-hmm.
determine like what does this gene mean or what does this gene do. We also give you what we call a personalized podcast. We actually call it a gene cast, where
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of audio files that speak to your gene. So you can also
Yeah.
look at it the other way, the scientific way. And it's really cool because that is like a scientist is sitting there with you and virtually examining your results.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we made it where you don't need help. But if there's a particular goal or concern, then yes, we have coaches that are trained to analyze genetics and say, hey, I need to lose 10 pounds, or my mom had breast cancer and I don't want it. But like, what is the concern? We can deal with it at the root cause genetic level and make sure you get past that plateau or wherever you're stuck.
And I think that's very important information to get out. I want to ask you before we wrap this up, because I want everyone to get information where they can find you. And I know you have a podcast also, and which is amazing because I've been listening to it. It's very good, and it's really it's very interesting for me to listen to other people's health journeys because
Hmm.
we're all different. We're
Yeah.
all of us are so different, and our outcomes are all going to be different. So I found that fascinating that you're having interviews with people. If you could sum up for me, what would you do if you were me? Like, what would you? How would you start? Would like, I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of have an idea of what I need to do,
Yeah.
but I wanted to hear that from you because we've
So
given
I would
everybody so
say
much information.
the first thing, if I was doing one thing, right? So the one thing that solves many problems is dealing with inflammation. We are, whether you're an MD, a naturopath, or a biohacker, everybody agrees that disease is
Hmm.
rooted in inflammation.
Yes.
What we don't understand is what is the inflammation rooted in? Because the solutions we have, that toolkit that a doctor has, is treating the disease, not asking why did it happen, right? So in that, I would say target your detox profile and support with the right supplementation and make up for what you don't do. That's the single biggest thing I would say that would change things overnight,
Hmm.
and help you prevent disease and kind of slow aging down, because you're going to take that load off the cells. All of a sudden, this inflammatory state, this toxic state is removed, and things can start to thrive. Then you can start building. It's kind of like you've repaired the foundation. I don't have this inflammatory state. Now I can optimize and eat the right way, and work on my neurochemicals and behave the way I want to behave, and work on my cardiovascular health and train the way that I want to train. But if you start with the innate cellular health first, and make sure that you're optimal in terms of how you deal with the environment and chemicals around you, it takes that load off. Then you're free to, it's like taking 10 years back, right? Giving yourself 10 years.
Let's wait for him to come
Good.
back.
Yeah. So we can end.
Oh,
Yeah,
can
you're
you guys
there.
hear me? Oh,
You
I'm
know,
here. Okay.
I do, I have to thank you a thousandfold, like a thousandfold, because I feel that what you have given me is such a gift. Um, Knowing at that level what's going on in my body is beyond. Some people would call it obsessive. They would think it's too much, it's ridiculous. But we said it here first. It's the future of medicine. It
Mm-hmm.
may not be in the next 5 years, but it's certainly we're starting to see this change significantly. And just the idea that it's becoming more mainstream and it's becoming so much more affordable for people, like just in the last 2 years alone, um, it's just sensational. So I thank you a thousandfold for it.
No, it was a
This
pleasure.
is this has been enlightening to me, and I hope for people listening, they all get to know now how messed up I am inside. Even though but you know what? We can revisit this. You can come back, and I can tell you what the changes I've made, and how I'm feeling. It'd be
Sure.
great. Tell everybody how they can find you, get in touch with the DNA company, how they can listen to your podcast.
Sure. It's the DNAcompany.com.
Okay.
So straight to the DNAcompany.com. The test is called the 360 report. The coaching and supporting that you were talking about, there's tons of video up there that explain all of them.
Yes.
We've created a bunch of supplements that actually manage genetic expression. So as opposed to, hey, you can't sleep, take some melatonin, like we've actually
Mm-hmm.
figured out the genetics of why you can't sleep. So take a look through there. There's also a ton of video on the supplements to explain how we think about medicine. There's a lot to learn there. There's a lot of blog articles that will teach you case studies and things, but go to the DNAcompany.com, buy the 360 report, and that will give you access to your portal, where you get all your reports, all your personal podcasts, your audio files, and a bunch of video that helps you navigate the reports. Our podcast is called Unpilled, and that's really our goal, is to get people out of chronic disease and healed and healthy. So the Unpilled podcast, find it wherever you listen. We're going to keep adding. We're doing a lot more Q&A now, speaking directly to the conditions. So we're going to do a few more of those. And this summer, we're launching some pretty cool stuff. We interviewed a whole bunch of doctors to get really deep down into conditions, and that's coming out in the summer.
That's amazing. And I also want to tell everybody that the DNA company was so gracious to offer me a discount code, which was so nice. So I'm going to put that up. I'll put that up here. If anybody's interested, you can get 20% off your 360 report, which is so gracious and lovely of you as well. So thank you for that, and to everybody listening if they're interested in it. And I wish you the best of health. And again, thank you so much. I
It
really
was a
appreciate it.
pleasure.
This has been incredible. We'll
It
be
was
in
a
touch.
pleasure.
We'll
Thank
stay
you.
in touch. I'll
Sure.
let you know how healthy I feel in just
All
a little
right.
while.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.